2024 has not begun well. The Ukraine-Russia conflict lingers. The Israeli-Palestinian war faces a high risk of escalation, and the U.S. continues its containment toward China both in trade and tech. In all these three important geopolitical issues in the world today, one nation stands out: America. Time and again, the nation that other countries call the world's policeman or the lighthouse of democracy has failed to bring peace and stability to the world. As the U.S. welcomes a new round of presidential elections in 2024, what global role will it play, and what changes will it bring? I recently caught up with Professor John Mearsheimer, a renowned realist in international relations theory. The 76-year-old is known for being clear in mind and sharp in observation. He offered me three insights that left me deeply impressed. First, on the relations between China and the U.S.
I think, as I've long argued, that the U.S.-China relationship is going to be a fundamentally competitive relationship, both economically and in terms of security. There's hardly anything that can be done to change that.
This view sounds quite pessimistic, given that so many people I interviewed last year hoped the two countries could find a better way to coexist.
You know, they say when the elephants fight, the grass gets trampled, and we are the grass.
This is quite true. Luckily, competition doesn't have to be negative.
This is not to deny that you can manage that competition in smart ways. And I think that what happened in San Francisco is that the Chinese decided and the Americans decided, here of course we're talking about Xi Jinping and Joe Biden, that it made sense to tamp down the intensity of the competition. And I think that what happened in San Francisco is that the two leaders did a reasonably good job of tamping down the competition.
In fact, the two countries have agreed on some significant deals, such as resuming the military-to-military hotline and working together to fight drugs, to name a few. But as the U.S. presidential election approaches, let's hope China-U.S. relations will not be derailed by the China-bashing rhetoric that has become a common theme among U.S. politicians. Another thing that has puzzled me is the U.S. role in Gaza conflict. America is Israel's strongest ally. Of the 89 times America used its veto power in the UN Security Council, 45 were done in support of Israel. So it's not strange that the U.S. has sided with Israel over the war in Gaza, even as the humanitarian crisis has escalated to unacceptable levels. But my question is that unconditional support really good for America? And that is not a question held by me alone. A recent poll by Reuters suggests U.S. public support for Israel's war in Gaza is eroding. But what about the White House? Here I received another key word from Professor Mearsheimer.
Huge numbers of defenseless civilians are being killed by the Israelis, and the Americans are providing military support for the Israelis and providing diplomatic support. And this is not surprisingly generated a lot of heat inside the administration. We want peace in the Middle East. And we're now in a situation where not only do we have a war involving Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip, but furthermore, there's a real danger of escalation to include bringing in Hezbollah, which would mean Lebanon got involved in the war, a war with Iran. And this is the last thing that the United States wants.
Gaza is not the only headache for Washington. On another battlefield in Ukraine, things are not developing as well as America and its allies first thought. For America, the goal was not really about supporting Ukrainians, but to weaken its old foe, Russia. And this wasn't said by me, but by U.S. Defense Secretary Lord Austin, though he said it much more politely.
We want to see Russia weakened to the degree that it can't do the kinds of things that it has done in invading Ukraine.
However, after nearly 2 years of fighting, things are not like when I visited Kiev last February to cover the 1-year anniversary of the conflict. Back then, many people thought Ukraine would end up defeating Russia. But now, the picture looks very different. The victory could belong to Russia.
If you look at the rhetoric now that comes out of the administration or the rhetoric in the mainstream media in the West, we're talking about preventing a Russian victory. We're talking about keeping the Ukrainians in the fight. We're talking about trying to help the Ukrainians hang on, because everyone recognizes that the counteroffensive this summer failed and there's little prospect that Ukraine can win. So there's just not good reason to continue this war the way we have been fighting it with the Ukrainians in the past. And again, even if we wanted to do that, we don't have the weaponry to give the Ukrainians to help them in any meaningful way to win this war. So what's going to happen here is that the Russians are ultimately going to prevail. The Russians are going to win. What exactly that victory looks like is hard to say.
Given the lack of proper solutions to these ongoing crises in Europe and the Middle East, and plus the U.S. continued hardline policy against China, many expect more instability and even volatility in 2024. This makes it even more imperative to have stability in the world, not a policeman who prioritizes his own interests above others, or a lighthouse of democracy when his own political system is flickering and nearly broken.